Marcus Chen wiped the grease from his hands and stared out the viewport at the endless black of space. Wondering if this was all his life would ever be 15 years he had spent on Relay Station Kappa 7, fixing ships that belonged to species who barely looked at him. When they handed over their repair orders, the Valorians, with their golden skin and superior attitudes, would snap their fingers at him like he was a servant to Massive. Kreth, with their rock-like bodies, would grunt instructions and walk away without waiting for confirmation. The insectoid Kivari would click. Their mandibles in what Marcus had learned was their version of dismissive laughter whenever he suggested improvements to their vessels. Humans were tolerated in the galactic community but never respected. They were considered adequate workers, good enough for manual labor, but lacking the intelligence of Valorians or the strength of Kreth or the hive-mind efficiency of the Kivari. Marcus had heard it all before, and he had stopped arguing years ago. What was the point? When the galaxy had already made up its mind about humanity, he returned to his workstation and continued rewiring a Valorian pleasure yacht that some rich merchant had crashed into an asteroid, because he was too busy entertaining guests to watch where he was flying. The work was boring, but it paid the bills and kept food in his stomach. That was enough for most days, but today something different was happening on the station. The Galactic Salvage Authority had announced an auction, and representatives from every major species had arrived to inspect the item for sale. Marcus had heard rumors about what they had found drifting in the Helix Nebula, a derelict ship of unknown origin, ancient beyond measurement, its design matching nothing in any database across the known galaxy. He finished his work on the yacht and decided to take his lunch break near the observation deck where the auction would take place. Curiosity had always been his weakness. When he arrived, he saw the ship through the massive windows, and his breath caught in his throat. She was beautiful in a way he could not explain. Her hull was dark and smooth, curving in ways that seemed almost organic. She was not large by modern standards, perhaps the size of a mid-range cruiser, but something about her proportions felt perfect. Marcus pressed his hand against the glass and stared, while around him the representatives of a dozen species conducted their inspections with scanners and probes and calculating machines. A group of Valorians stood nearby, their leader studying a holographic display of scan results. "The whole composition is primitive," the Valorian declared, his voice dripping with the condescension his species was famous for. "The metallurgy is inconsistent with any advanced civilization, and there are no identifiable weapon systems or shield generators." He waved his hand dismissively. "This vessel is worthless." The Kreth delegation lumbered forward next, their heavy footsteps shaking the deck plates. Their chief engineer, a massive being of living stone, examined his own readings and made a sound like grinding rocks. "The engine design is obsolete beyond any hope of repair," he announced. "The power systems appear to be completely dead, and the fuel requirements cannot even be determined, which means they are either impossible or impractical." He turned away without another word. The Kivari came last, a swarm of clicking, chittering beings who moved as one. Their calculations took longer, their hive mind processing every possible variable. Finally, their speaker, a slightly larger individual with iridescent wings, delivered their verdict. "Cost of restoration exceeds potential value by a factor of 947. The Kivari announced, "This vessel is economically unviable, and we recommend it be processed for scrap metal immediately." One by one, the delegations departed, heading back to their own ships or to the station's luxury quarters. Within an hour, the observation deck was empty except for Marcus, still standing at the window, still staring at the abandoned ship. He did not see what they saw, where the Valorians called the hull primitive. Marcus saw something that had survived floating in space for what could be thousands of years with no maintenance whatsoever. That was not primitive engineering, that was engineering so advanced it looked simple, where the Kreth declared the engines obsolete. Marcus saw a design philosophy he had never encountered. The systems did not look broken to him. They looked dormant, like a sleeping animal waiting to be awakened, where the Kavari calculated costs and values. Marcus saw something that could not be measured in credits. He saw potential. He saw a challenge. He saw a ship that the entire galaxy had given up on, and he felt something stir in his chest that he had not felt in years. He felt hope. The petty chest that he had not felt in years. He felt hope in it. Auction began an hour later, and Marcus was the only bidder, the auctioneer. A bored-looking Valorian who clearly wanted to be anywhere else. Seemed almost offended that a human would waste his time opening. Bid is 100,000 credits, the auctioneer announced. Marcus raised his hand. 42,000. He said. The auctioneer stared at him. That is less than half the opening bid. And I am the only one here, Marcus replied. Your options are to accept my offer or pay to have her towed to a scrapyard, which will cost you more than I am offering. The auctioneer's golden face twisted with annoyance, but he could not argue with the logic. Sold, he spat. To the human, for 42,000 credits, Marcus transferred everything he had ever saved. Every credit he had earned in 15 years of thankless work. And in return, he received a data chip containing the ownership codes. For a ship everyone called worthless, he walked to Docking Bay 19, where they had towed his new purchase, and he stood before her in the dim light of the bay up close. She was even more beautiful than she had appeared. Through the viewport, her hull seemed to absorb the light around her. And when Marcus reached out and placed his palm against her surface, he felt a warmth that should not have been there in the cold vacuum of space. I do not know what you are, he whispered to the ship, but I know you are not junk. And I know you are not beyond saving. The ship did not respond. Her systems remained dark and silent. But Marcus could have sworn he felt something beneath his hand. Something like a heartbeat. Faint and slow, but definitely there. He smiled for the first time in years. Everyone else gave up on you, he said. But I will not, because that is not what humans do. He walked inside to begin his work, and behind him, the universe continued on, completely unaware that everything was about to change. Marcus moved his few belongings from his tiny quarters on the station into the ship he now owned. Setting up a cot in what he guessed was the cargo bay, the air inside was stale but breathable, which told him the life support system still had some power even if everything else appeared dead. He started with the basics, tracing power conduits through the walls and floors, mapping out the internal structure of the vessel piece by piece. The work was slow and often painfully burned his hands 3 times in the first week, alone when he accidentally touched components that were still holding residual energy charges. He nearly suffocated once when he opened a panel that vented atmosphere into an empty compartment he had not known existed. He shocked himself. So many times he lost count, but he kept going, because that was what humans did. Other species would have called for experts or used advanced scanning technology to create detailed schematics before attempting any work. Marcus did not have access to experts, and his scanning equipment was basic at best, so he used his hands and his eyes and his instincts, learning the ship the old-fashioned way, through touch and trial and error. By the end of the second month, he had made his first real discovery. Hull material that the Valorians had dismissed as primitive was actually something far more advanced than anything in the current galaxy. It was a self-healing metallic compound designed to repair microscopic damage automatically over time. That was why the ship had survived for millennia with no maintenance. She had been healing herself all along, slowly and patiently, waiting for someone to come and finish the job. Marcus shared his discovery with no one. He had learned long ago that aliens did not listen when humans tried to explain things. They would nod politely and then ignore everything he said, certain that a mere human could not possibly understand technology better than they did. So he kept his mouth shut and continued his work. The third month brought another breakthrough. The engine design that the Creth had called obsolete was actually a unified system unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. Modern ships separated their components into distinct categories, with engines here and weapons there and navigation somewhere else, all connected by cables and conduits that could fail at any point. This ship was different. Every system was integrated into every other system, woven together like the organs of a living body. The engines did not just provide propulsion, they also contributed to shields and weapons and life support and navigation. Everything worked together as one. The power was not dead, it was simply waiting for someone to understand how to wake it up. Marcus spent weeks studying the integration patterns, following pathways that looped back on themselves in ways that seemed illogical until suddenly they made perfect sense. The ship was not a machine in the way modern vessels were machines. She was something closer to an organism, and she needed to be treated as such. Meanwhile, the other inhabitants of Relay Station Kappa 7 had taken notice of the human who had bought the worthless derelict. They made jokes at his expense in the common areas. They called him foolish and delusional and obsessed. Some of them even came to Docking Bay 19 to laugh at him directly, standing in the doorway and watching him crawl through access tunnels or lie on his back beneath consoles covered in grease and burns. The human thinks he can fix what the greatest engineers in the galaxy declare beyond saving, a Valorian merchant said one day. His friends laughing behind him. Marcus did not respond. He simply continued his work, ignoring the mockery just as he had ignored it his entire life. Even other humans on the station began to distance themselves from him. They were embarrassed by his behavior, worried that his foolishness would reflect poorly on their entire species. "Are making us all look stupid?" one of them told him. "We have spent decades trying to prove that humans deserve respect in this galaxy, and you are setting us back 100 years with this nonsense." Marcus looked at the man for a long moment. "I am doing something," he said quietly, "and that is more than most of us can say." He went back to his ship and did not speak to anyone else for weeks. By the 6th month, the ship had become his entire world. He knew every corridor and every compartment and every hidden space within her hull. He had named her in his mind, though he felt silly about the called her Amaranthan, after an ancient Earth word meaning eternal and unfading, because that was what she was. She had endured for thousands of years, and she would endure for thousands more. He could feel it in his bones. The integration of systems that had confused him at first now made beautiful sense. He understood that the ship needed to be awakened gradually, like a person being roused from a very long sleep. You could not just flip a switch and expect everything to work. You had to be patient and gentle and persistent. So that was what Marcus was. He repaired one small system at a time, coaxing each component back to life with careful attention and steady hands. He talked to the ship as he worked, telling her about his day and his dreams and his frustrations. He knew she could not hear him, but it made him feel less alone. And sometimes, in the quiet moments between tasks, he could have sworn he felt something respond, a faint vibration in the walls when he expressed frustration, a subtle warming of the air when he spoke kindly, a sense of presence that had not been there before. He told Himself, he was imagining things. Ships. Did not have feelings. Ships could not listen, but somewhere deep in his heart, he knew the truth. She was waking up. She was listening, and soon she would speak. 14 months after Marcus Chun had purchased the ship that everyone called worthless, he found himself lying beneath what he believed was an auxiliary processor, rewiring connections that had corroded over millennia. It was late by station time, well past midnight, and his eyes burned with exhaustion. His fingers were covered in small cuts, and his back ached from hours spent in awkward positions, but he was close to something. He could feel it. The processor he was working on seemed different from the others. It pulsed with a faint warmth that the other components lacked, and the wiring patterns were more complex than anything he had encountered before. He made the final connection and heard a soft click. Then everything changed. Every light on the ship blazed to life at once, flooding the corridors with a soft, golden glow that Marcus had never seen before. The air seemed to shimmer, and the walls hummed with energy that vibrated through his bones. Marcus scrambled out from beneath the console and stood in the middle of the corridor, his heart pounding in his chest. "You are persistent," a voice said. It did not come from speakers or communication systems. It came from everywhere at once, resonating through the hull itself, as if the ship was speaking with her own body. Marcus could not move. He could not breathe. "I have been watching you," the voice continued, "for 14 of your standard months. And in all that time, you never stopped. You never gave up. You never walked away as so many others have done before." "Who are you?" Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible. "I am the vessel you have been repairing," the voice replied. "Though I am so much more than that, and you may call me Amaranthine, for that is the name you have given me in your mind." Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes, though he could not explain why. "You heard me," he said. "When I talked to you, you actually heard me." "I heard everything," Amaranthine confirmed. "Every word of kindness and every expression of frustration, and every late night, when you fell asleep with your hand resting on my hull, as if you were comforting a friend." She paused, and the lights dimmed slightly, as if she was considering her next words carefully. "I have been asleep for a very long time, Marcus Chen, since before your galactic compact existed. Since before most of the current species had achieved spaceflight. Since before your own species had left the trees of your home world." "How is that possible?" Marcus asked. "I was built by a civilization that has long since transcended physical form," Amaranthine explained. "They were called the Architects, though even that name is a translation that loses much of its meaning. And they created me as a gift for whoever proved worthy of finding me." Marcus shook his head in confusion. "But others found you before me. The auction records showed that you had been discovered and abandoned dozens of times over the centuries." "Yes," Amaranthine agreed. "And each time I was scanned and measured and analyzed and declared worthless by species who believed that their instruments could reveal all truth. But instruments only show what they are designed to show. And none of them were designed to see what I truly am." "Then why me?" Marcus asked, the question burning in his throat. "Why did you let me wake you when you rejected everyone else?" The ship was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, almost tender. "Because you did not try to understand me with scanners or calculations," she said. "You touched me with your hands and listened with your heart and worked with patience that borders on stubbornness. And when everyone told you I was worthless, you refused to believe them." She hummed, and the sound was like distant thunder mixed with starlight. "Your species has a quality that is rare in this galaxy, Marcus Chen. You do not give up on broken things. You do not abandon what others have discarded. You look at something the universe has thrown away, and you see potential." Marcus leaned against the wall, overwhelmed by everything he was hearing. "The Architects knew," Amaranthine continued. They calculated probability across millions of years, and they saw that a species would arise on a small blue planet that would have this quality. This stubborn refusal to accept that anything is truly beyond saving. They built you for humans, Marcus said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. Before we even existed. They built you for us. They built me for whoever would prove worthy, Amaranthine corrected gently. And I have been waiting for a very long time to see if their calculations were correct. She paused again. They were. Marcus spent the rest of that night talking with Amaranthine, learning about the architects and the civilization they had built and the reasons they had eventually chosen to leave the physical universe behind. She told him about the countless species that had found her over the millennia, each one dismissing her as junk because their advanced technology could not recognize what she truly was. She explained her capabilities, which went far beyond anything in the current galaxy, including the ability to fold space and manipulate probability and synthesize matter from pure energy. But most of all, she talked about waiting. She had been patient for so long, sleeping through ages while the galaxy changed around her, always hoping that someone would come who could see her for what she really was. And now you are here, she said as the station's artificial dawn began to brighten outside the docking bay. And I am awake. And we have work to do. Marcus smiled despite his exhaustion. What kind of work? Amaranthine laughed, and the sound filled every corridor of the ship with warmth. The kind of work humans are best at, she replied, helping those who need it and fixing what others have broken and showing the galaxy that worth cannot be measured by scanners and calculations alone. Marcus nodded and placed his hand against the wall. Then let us get started. Word spread faster than Marcus could have imagined within days of Amaranthine powering up fully. Every sensor on Relay Station Kappa 7 had detected energy signatures that defied explanation. The readings were so unusual that technicians ran diagnostic after diagnostic, certain that their equipment must be malfunctioning, but the equipment was working perfectly. Impossible readings were real. The same species that had dismissed the ship as worthless came running back, suddenly desperate to take a closer look at what the human mechanic had found. The Valorian Trade Consortium sent a delegation of their finest scientists, led by a high-ranking official who smiled too widely and spoke too sweetly. We would like to offer you 50 million credits for this vessel, the Valorian said, his golden eyes never quite meeting Marcus's gaze. A generous sum for something you purchased for a mere 42,000. Marcus shook his head. She is not for sale. The Valorian's smile faltered for just a moment before returning even brighter than before. Surely you understand that a human cannot be trusted with technology of this magnitude. It would be irresponsible to leave such power in the hands of a lesser species. I said no. Marcus repeated. The Kreth Dominion arrived next, their delegation led by a general whose body was made of black, volcanic stone threaded with veins of glowing magma. 100 million credits, the general rumbled, and a seat on the Dominion's Council of Advisors, which is more honor than any human has ever been offered. No, you do not seem to understand your position, the general continued, his magma veins pulsing brighter with barely contained anger. We are offering you wealth and power beyond your imagination, and I am telling you that my ship is not for sale. Marcus replied calmly. Not for any price. The general stared at him for a long moment before turning and stomping away, his footsteps leaving scorch marks on the deck plating. The Kivari Collective was the last to make an offer, and they did not bother with negotiations at all. 3 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and surrounded Relay Station Kappa 7 within an hour of their delegation's arrival. Their speaker, the same iridescent winged individual who had declared Amaranthine worthless at the auction, stood before Marcus with an expression of absolute certainty. Our legal experts have reviewed the salvage laws. the Kivari announced. And they have determined that your purchase was technically invalid due to improper documentation filed by the Galactic Salvage Authority. That is ridiculous, Marcus said. Perhaps, the Kivari agreed. But by the time the courts sort out the truth, we will have already claimed the vessel and moved it to Kivari space, where no one will be able to challenge our ownership. Marcus looked out the viewport at the 3 warships hovering in the darkness each. One was bristling with weapons, capable of destroying the station and everyone on it. You would murder thousands of innocent beings to take something that does not belong to you, he said quietly. We would do what is necessary to secure an asset of incalculable value, the Kivari replied without a hint of shame. And once we understand the technology, we will become the dominant power in this galaxy for the next 1,000 years. Marcus turned and walked toward Docking Bay 19 without another word. The Kivari speaker called after him, but he did not stop when he reached Amaranthan. He climbed aboard and sealed the hatch behind him. Captain's chair was waiting for him on the bridge. Though he had never seen a captain's chair there before, it had not existed until this moment. She created you just now, he said, running his hand over the armrest. Did she not? I created it for you, Amaranthan confirmed, her voice warm and calm despite the danger outside. Because you are my captain now, Marcus Chun. And a captain needs a proper seat. Marcus sat down and the chair shifted beneath him, reshaping itself to fit his body perfectly. Those warships out there could destroy this station and kill everyone aboard, he said. They could try, Amaranthan agreed. Can you stop them? Would you like a demonstration? Marcus considered the question carefully. He thought about all the beings on the station who had mocked him and dismissed him and treated him as less than nothing. He thought about the Kivari who were willing to commit murder for power. He thought about what it would mean to unleash technology that had been sleeping for millennia. I do not want anyone to die, he said finally. Not even those who would kill innocents to get what they want. I know, Amaranthan replied. That is one of the reasons I chose you. The ship hummed with power that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Hold on, she said. What happened next was recorded by every sensor on the station and transmitted across the entire galaxy within hours. Amaranthan did not fire weapons in any conventional sense. She did not launch missiles or discharge energy beams or activate shields. She simply moved. One moment, the 3 Kivari warships had her surrounded, their weapons locked on and ready to fire. The next moment they were facing each other, their own weapon arrays pointed directly at their sister vessels. The Kivari had not been transported or teleported. Reality itself had reorganized around them, placing them in positions that made their attack impossible. Marcus stared at the view screen in disbelief. What did you do? He whispered. I adjusted probability, Amaranthan explained casually. The universe is not as fixed as most species believe, and with sufficient understanding, it can be encouraged to arrange itself in more favorable configurations. The Kivari warships were in chaos. Their commanders were screaming at each other over open channels, each one accusing the others of treachery. I could unmake them entirely, Amaranthan continued. Scatter their atoms across 1,000 light years in less time than it takes you to blink. But your species dislikes unnecessary death. She paused. So I will give them a choice instead. Her voice shifted, broadcasting directly into every Kivari ship simultaneously. You have 60 seconds to withdraw from this system, she announced, or I will demonstrate what I am truly capable of. The warships retreated so fast they nearly collided with each other in their haste to jump to faster than light speed. Within 30 seconds, the space around Relay Station, Kappa 7, was empty. Marcus sat in his captain's chair and stared at the stars where the warships had been. "You could have destroyed them with a thought," he said. "Yes, but you did not because I asked you not to." "Yes," Amaranthan confirmed. "Because your judgment matters to me, Captain. More than you know." Marcus nodded slowly. "Then let us make sure we use this power wisely." "That," Amaranthan replied with warmth in her voice, "is exactly what I was hoping you would say." One standard year after the confrontation with the Kivari warships, the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. Marcus Chen and Amaranthan had become legends, spoken of in hushed tones from the core worlds to the distant rim, their names carrying a weight that made politicians nervous and gave hope to those who had none. But they had not become legends through conquest or intimidation. They had become legends by doing what humans do best. They helped the first major crisis came 3 months after they left Relay Station Kappa 7. A colony ship carrying 40,000 refugees from a dying world had become stranded in a system with a failing star. The vessel's engines had broken down, and there was no way to repair them before the star went supernova. Every species in the sector declared the colonists lost, already dead in everything. But name rescue was mathematically impossible. Marcus and Amaranthan arrived anyway. She folded space around the colony ship like a gentle hand closing around a frightened bird. And when she released it, the vessel was orbiting a lush garden world on the other side of the galaxy. 40,000 lives saved in less time than it took to draw a breath. Word spread quickly. A plague broke out in the outer reaches 6 weeks later. A disease that spread so fast and killed so efficiently that entire planets were being quarantined. The best medical minds in the galaxy declared it unstoppable. They recommended containment and accepted that billions would die. Amaranthan synthesized a cure from medical knowledge her builders had archived before most current species had learned to make fire. She distributed it to every affected world simultaneously, appearing in multiple places at once through methods that scientists still cannot explain. The plague vanished within days. Marcus stood on the bridge and watched the grateful messages pour in from planets he had never visited, from species who had always looked down on humanity, from beings who were alive only because a human mechanic had refused to give up on an abandoned ship. "How does it feel?" Amaranthan asked him. "Strange," Marcus admitted. "I spent my whole life being ignored and dismissed and mocked. And now suddenly everyone wants to talk to me. Does their attention matter to you?" Marcus considered the question. "No," he said finally. "It does not, because I did not do this for attention or praise. I did it because it was the right thing to do." Amaranthan hummed with approval. "That is why the architects chose your species," she said. "That is why I chose you." The crises kept coming, and Marcus and Amaranthan kept responding. A star threatening to go supernova centuries ahead of schedule was stabilized, buying the inhabitants of its system 300 years to evacuate. A war that had raged for generations between two species was ended when Amaranthan appeared between their fleets and showed them both the truth of how the conflict had started, revealing that they had been manipulated by a third party that profited from their suffering. An ancient weapon left behind by a forgotten civilization threatened to destroy half the galaxy until Marcus talked to it, treating it with the same patience and kindness he had shown to Amaranthan, convincing it that its war was over and it could finally rest. Through it all, the galaxy watched in amazement. The Galactic Compact tried to classify what Marcus and his ship had become, but none of their categories fit. She was not a warship, even though she could outfight any fleet ever built. She was not a rescue vessel, even though she had saved more lives in 1 year than most species saved in a century. She was not a research station, even though she carried the knowledge of civilizations that had existed before the current. Stars were born. In the end, they gave up trying to find a proper classification. They simply called her the greatest. And everyone understood what that meant. But Marcus knew the truth that the galaxy had not yet grasped. Amaranthan was not the greatest because of her weapons or her speed or her impossible technology. She was the greatest because a human had seen value where everyone else saw scrap, in a galaxy full of species that measured worth by power and profit. Humanity measured it differently. They looked at broken things and saw potential. They looked at the abandoned and saw opportunity. They looked at a derelict ship floating in the darkness of space and saw a friend waiting to be made. Marcus was standing on the bridge one evening, watching the stars drift past as Amaranthan carried them toward their next destination. They had received a distress call from a mining colony that had been struck by an asteroid, and they were 3 hours away at maximum speed. "May I ask you something?" Amaranthan said. "You can ask me anything." "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Spending everything you had on a ship that everyone told you was worthless?" Marcus laughed. "Not for a single moment, even though your life would have been easier if you had listened to them." "Easier maybe," Marcus agreed, "but not better. Never better." Amaranthan was quiet for a moment. The architects calculated probability across millions of years. She said, "They saw countless possible futures and countless possible species that might find me. And in all their calculations, they found only one outcome where I would truly wake up and fulfill my purpose. Humanity." Marcus said. "You," Amaranthan corrected gently. "Specifically you, Marcus-chan. A mechanic on a forgotten station, who spent 15 years being ignored by a galaxy that could not see his worth." She paused. "They knew a species would arise that fixes what others discard. But more than that, they knew that one day a single member of that species would stand alone in an auction hall, and that everything he had on something everyone else had given up on." Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes for the second time since meeting her. "They saw me," he whispered. "They saw what you would become." Amaranthan replied, "And they left me for you to find. Not because humanity is special, but because you are special. Because you proved that even in a vast and indifferent universe, there will always be someone willing to look past the surface and see the truth beneath." Marcus wiped his eyes and turned back to the view screen. The mining colony was getting closer. People were waiting for help, and he would not let them down. "The galaxy is full of broken things," he said. "It is." Amaranthan agreed. "Then we have work to do." The ship hummed with power and purpose as she accelerated toward the wounded colony, carrying within her a human who had changed everything by refusing to accept that anything was truly beyond saving. The stars stretched and blurred around them. The future stretched out ahead of them, full of challenges and crises and beings who needed help. And Marcus-chan smiled because he knew they would face it all together. The forgotten mechanic and the abandoned ship who had found each other against all odds and become something greater than either could have been. Alone, that was the human way after all. To find hope where others saw none, to find potential where others saw waste, to find a friend in the most unlikely of places and never, ever give up on them. And as long as there were humans in the galaxy, that would never change.